Tonight, wage freeze. Public sector workers told no pay rise for 12 months as the state deals with rising unemployment. Good evening, I'm Juanita Phillips. This is ABC News. Wrapped in a bedsheet and dumped near a playground, 2 years on, a Sydney man is charged over a brutal murder. Revelations: an SAS soldier filmed shooting dead an unarmed Afghan man is being investigated for another alleged unlawful killing. And shipped to shore, the unusual debris washing up on our beaches. They've been on the front line in the war against coronavirus, often putting their lives at risk. But today, nurses, cleaners and many other essential workers were told they'll have to cop a wage freeze for 12 months. It'll apply to the entire state public sector. The Premier says everyone has to make sacrifices, but she will guarantee no forced redundancies. The opposition says it's a slap in the face for 400,000 workers.
According to the Premier, we're all in this together.
Today is not about managing the budget, it's not about managing the economy, it's all about saving livelihoods, saving jobs and saving lives.
With so many people losing their jobs, the government insists a pay rise for public sector workers, including nurses, teachers and police officers, is no longer sustainable.
This is not an easy decision, but it's a fair decision and it's the right decision for the greater good.
The wage freeze means 410,000 workers will forego their annual 2.5% wage increase for the next 12 months. But it comes with a guarantee of no forced redundancies. The government says the $3 billion saved will go towards creating new jobs and shoring up the health sector.
These are the very workers who've bent over backwards, stepped up to the challenge during the bushfires and the COVID crisis, and she's rewarding their extra effort by saying, I'm going to cut your pay today.
This is an appalling decision at a shocking time.
And there's community concern too.
They deserve a pay rise for the good things they've done for the people of, for our country.
They were frontliners and then they deserve that, really. For this year, they deserve that.
Some economists say the move could cause more harm than good.
They're going to set a terrible precedent that private sector employers are going to follow as well. This is a recipe to take this recession and turn it into a depression.
The government wants to implement its new policy through regulation, but without a majority in the upper house, that move can be dismissed. And Labor and the minor parties say that's exactly what they'll do.
I'd suggest they look other places, like the $1.6 billion they're proposing on the powerhouse, or the $87,000 pay rise they gave to somebody like the New South Wales Police Commissioner.
A big challenge for the country's biggest employer. Antoinette Collins, ABC News, Sydney.
There's been a major breakthrough in the murder of a Sydney woman whose body was found dumped in a reserve 2 years ago. Crime reporter Mark Reddy joins me now. Mark, police have arrested someone.
Juanita, Dennis Petrobin remains behind bars and is due to face court tomorrow. The 51-year-old was arrested while attending Parramatta Police Station on an unrelated matter. He was charged with the murder of Nicole Cartwright. Police say the pair met online through a dating app and then agreed to meet on the night of her 32nd birthday. Detectives allege she was killed that night. 2 days later, a council worker found her body badly decomposed, wrapped in a bedsheet, dumped next to a children's playground at Hunters Hill.
It will be alleged that this man took her from an address to the reserve and, and unfortunately dumped the body like some piece of unwanted refuse. It's a cold-hearted act.
Nicole Cartwright's family is understandably devastated tonight. They say they will continue to grieve her loss, thanking the New South Wales Police Force for their efforts, but they say they can simply not comprehend how Nicole Cartwright will never come home. Juanita?
You're reporting there. The Australian Federal Police have announced they won't charge News Corp political journalist Anika Smethurst over a story she published more than 2 years ago based on leaked top-secret information. Ms Smethurst's Canberra home was raided last year after she revealed a proposal to expand the powers of the nation's overseas listening post, the Australian Signals Directorate. The AFP was called in to find the leak, but has now decided there's not enough evidence to prosecute anyone involved. Senior officers have defended the 2-year time frame for the inquiry.
We have a serious breach. We have a release of a top secret security document released into the public. It was a serious breach. It needed to be investigated. We investigated. We did our job.
News Corp has welcomed the decision but argues it proves the need for press freedom laws in Australia. Another AFP investigation into 2 ABC journalists over a separate series of stories is still ongoing. An Australian Special Forces soldier filmed shooting dead an unarmed Afghan man is also being investigated for the alleged unlawful killing of another civilian. ABC Investigations has spoken to members of an SAS patrol who allege the same operator killed an unarmed disabled man on an earlier operation in 2012. Mark Willacy has this exclusive report and a warning: it contains scenes that some viewers may find distressing.
It was this SAS helmet camera vision broadcast by Four Corners that for the first time showed how some individuals in Australia's Special Forces dealt with Afghan civilians. Brought down by an Australian dog and curled up on the ground in a wheat field, this young man is quiet, compliant and unarmed. Training his weapon on him is an SAS operator known as Soldier C.
Quick, no! Quick!
After this killing was broadcast in March, Soldier C was stood down. He's now being investigated by the Australian Federal Police. The ABC can now reveal that Soldier C is alleged to have killed another unarmed Afghan 2 months before the Wheatfield shooting.
2 members of Soldier C's patrol that day have told the ABC they witnessed the killing. Both say the victim was unarmed, a civilian, and was intellectually disabled. One says he was limping away from the Australians in fear when Soldier C shot him in the back of the head from 15 to 20 metres away. One SAS patrol member says the dead man was then dressed in a combat chest rig containing assault rifle magazines so that they could claim he was a combatant. It's an incident known among the Special Forces as the village idiot killing.
The soldiers also say the killing was covered up. At a briefing after the incident, the patrol was told that the man should be regarded as a high-value target and therefore a legitimate kill. An ABC investigation has tracked down the victim's relatives and discovered that the dead man's name was Zia Uddin, a farmer in his early 20s from Kandahar province, who his family says was mentally disabled.
There was a raid. Helicopters landed at 11 in the morning. Ziauddin was about 80 to 100 metres away from them and was walking home. But then the soldiers shot him in here. The bullet had pierced through his skull.
The ABC can confirm this case, like the killing in the Wheatfield, is being investigated by the Australian Federal Police.
We have a number of active, and we're on the record, a number of active investigations in relation to war crimes.
How seriously is the AFP taking these allegations?
Very seriously.
The 2 cases involving Soldier C are being investigated by the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force as part of an inquiry into alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. And Defence says it would be inappropriate to comment while that inquiry is still underway. Mark Willacy, ABC News.
There's been more chaos on the streets of Hong Kong, with police arresting 180 people protesting against new laws. Riot police fired pepper pellets and tear gas to disperse demonstrators and onlookers in the central business district. The protesters are angry about new legislation that will make insulting China's national anthem a criminal offence, with up to 3 years jail and a $10,000 fine. It's seen by many as another attempt by China to erode Hong Kong's freedoms as a semi-autonomous territory.
The Hong Kong people fully understand that this is a very important battle for Hong Kong people to fight against the other evil law, to uphold the one country, two system.
Hong Kong's parliament is set to debate the bill in the next few days. Riots have broken out in the US state of Minneapolis over the death of an unarmed black man at the hands of police. 4 officers have been fired after video emerged of one of them kneeling on the neck of the handcuffed man who later died in hospital. North America correspondent David Lipson reports, and a warning, this report contains distressing images.
It's happened again. Fury and grief vented on the streets of America. Tear gas fired at crowds, rocks thrown at police, vehicles trashed, and more lives lost, sparked by the death of a black man at the hands of white police officers. The arrest of George Floyd is captured here on a mobile phone.
I can't breathe, officer.
Pinned to the ground.
They gonna kill me. They gonna kill me, man.
Handcuffed with a police officer's knee on his neck.
Bro, with your feet on his neck, man, you get off the ground.
He pleads for air. Don't kill me, he utters. They're among his last words. Onlookers beg the officers for mercy.
Bro, he's not moving.
By the time an ambulance arrives, he's unresponsive and later pronounced dead.
He kept saying I can't breathe, and then later on he said he started calling his mama name and he died.
Police say the suspect was under the influence when they arrived to arrest him over an allegation of forgery. The mayor was far less forgiving.
When you hear someone calling for help, you are supposed to help. This officer failed in the most basic human sense.
Last year, almost 1,100 Americans were killed by police. About a quarter were black, but they make up just 13% of the population. State authorities and the FBI have stepped in. Body cam footage of the incident is being reviewed. In the meantime, the 4 officers in attendance have been sacked.
Being black in America should not be a death sentence.
Another American community in mourning. David Lipson, ABC News, Washington.
While many students coped well with learning from home recently, it also exposed the digital divide between the haves and the have-nots. At one tiny school in northern New South Wales, not one of the students had a computer or an internet connection at home. The Education Department said it would provide digital devices, but for this school, they never arrived in time.
Not a single student at Cabbage Tree Island Public School has a laptop or reliable internet at home. That's a problem in a pandemic when your schoolwork suddenly relies on it.
I couldn't do it because I had no Wi-Fi and no computer to do it on.
Wedged in the middle of the Richmond River, south of Ballina, the school is easy to miss, but its principal says she never expected to be forgotten by the government. 2 months ago, the Department of Education said it would lend devices to students who needed them. Dion Anderson ordered enough iPads, laptops and internet dongles for her 40 pupils. Nothing arrived until last week.
Finally.
In the boxes were 9 iPads, but without internet connection, they're virtually useless.
If the department had communicated earlier that there was going to be such a delay, I would have continued to look at other options.
The school also had half a dozen laptops, but they too had no remote internet, so teachers saw no point lending them out.
We didn't get back to her. That's not acceptable to me. It's not acceptable to our department. And we're now focused at working and supporting Dion for that ongoing education continuity.
The Department of Education says it sent out more than 6,000 devices and over 6,000 internet dongles to schools during the shutdown, prioritising years 11 and 12 and disadvantaged students. Back on the island, school life is returning to normal, but teachers can't help having lingering concerns.
This is just going to put them further behind. When we want our kids to be deadly at school, it's just sad.
For now, old-fashioned pen and paper will have to do. Amy Greenbank, ABC News, Sydney.
Coming across rubbish at the beach isn't all that surprising, but up and down the coast, the litter that's turning up has been turning heads. Cargo containers that fell off a ship are washing ashore, and some of the debris is dangerous, forcing 10 Sydney beaches to close.
It takes a lot to startle folks on a nudist beach. But at Birdie Beach on the Central Coast, they received a rude shock.
From afar, it kind of looked like a big rock or something.
And then when I came over, I kind of was thinking, oh yeah, it's like a new sculpture by the sea style.
The containers are among 40 that fell from the APL England. The cargo ship was en route from China to Melbourne when it hit rough seas southeast of Sydney on Sunday. This afternoon it docked in Brisbane, a delicate operation.
Certainly one of the risks here is any of those containers coming off.
In its wake, beaches were littered with debris. Malabar was one of the worst affected in Sydney. Plastic containers, air conditioning ducts, and surely a sign of the times, surgical masks strewn across the sand.
I'm devastated. I cried the first 5 minutes.
While the trash was taken and some hunted for treasure, Randwick Council shut the sand. While the beaches are now clear of rubbish, experts believe more items from the ship will wash up in the coming days. They say residents shouldn't pick them up themselves, instead phone authorities. The debris could be dangerous.
There could be heavier materials. We did find some air conditioning ducts, so we just don't know what else there is.
It's the second time the ship has lost containers in Australian waters. Jessie Dorset, ABC News.
Still to come this hour, billions are spent each year on surgery to fix back pain, but does it actually work?
I remember the surgeon said to me, at the end of this, you'll be normal. The pain is 10 times worse than childbirth.
It's important just not to say, because surgery is not right for all back pain, that we just say no surgery for any back pain.
Plus, why apprentices are being hit hard by the pandemic. That's coming up.
The Prime Minister put the call out for a new wages accord, and now the real challenge begins. Workers want better pay rises and job security. Businesses want simpler awards and agreements. All sides are cautiously optimistic, but well aware there are no guarantees a deal will be done. Here's National Affairs correspondent Greg Jennett.
Back when beers, pubs and footy on TV were normal, cheers. The Albanese leadership began on this day last year. A couple of crises later, shame on you! The anniversaries met with a campaign to save a seat and bemusement at the sudden interest in a new industrial relations agenda.
It's a good thing that people are having discussions. I always do have discussions. There's nothing new in it.
Except Labor's locked out, and deliberately, from these discussions.
The jobs is the thing. That's what's got to unite everybody.
We're going into this with an open mind and also, optimism.
The ALP's industrial wing, not its political one, will share centre stage in talks the Prime Minister's set up with business and unions. In search of repairs to a system with conflict at its core. But exactly what are they trying to fix? For workers, the grievances are slow wages growth, even when profits were good, casual jobs instead of permanent ones, and making companies comply with laws. For business, it's the complexity of awards and enterprise agreements. In all, 5 discussions to be had in just 4 months.
There is a strong level of agreement, at least, that problems exist that need to be solved.
Flexibility for job creation in the COVID-hit economy's the buzzword. The government's even leaving room for failure on some of the 5 fronts in the hope of compromise on a couple. Goodwill's a feature at the outset, and it extends to avoiding traditional deal-breaking tests like all workers needing to be better off before change can be contemplated, a measure of just how much COVID-19 has changed the landscape. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Canberra.
Well, one group who say they can't wait for a pay rise is frontline disability support workers. They're fighting for a temporary $5 an hour increase because of the extra risk they take being exposed to coronavirus. Here's Disability Affairs reporter Naz Campanella.
Before COVID-19, Paola Galladley used to support people living with a disability in day centres. But when restrictions were introduced, she started working with clients in their homes.
In a lot of cases, the sort of support we provide is really difficult to do at a social distance.
The 54-year-old from the New South Wales South Coast says infection is a constant concern.
It's just something you can't just leave work and forget about it.
It's that increased risky workload that is the subject of a wage case before the Fair Work Commission. Support workers are asking for a temporary increase of almost $5 an hour in recognition of their jobs helping people with confirmed or suspected coronavirus infections. Unions are backing the push, saying it's needed to ensure workers continue to show up.
Understandably, it does increase the amount of work that those workers are doing, the intensity of that work.
In their submissions to Fair Work, some major industry groups say there's no evidence of increased risk during the pandemic, and if there was, it would be negligible. But one disability service provider has already started paying the increased wages to affected staff.
It is not fair that we are expecting these incredibly capable, committed, loyal staff to turn up and put themselves potentially in harm's way, and not even to recognise that.
So far, so good.
Paula hopes next month's decision will acknowledge the value of her work.
That's a recognition of the increased level of responsibility and also a lot of personal sacrifice that would need to be that support worker supporting a person with COVID-19.
Well done, Paula.
Recognition of an important job in uncertain times. Naz Campanella, ABC News.
Animal and plant species which were already considered endangered or threatened may have been totally wiped out by the last fire season. The Royal Commission into the bushfires has heard the inferno proved to be an ecological disaster. Political reporter Anna Henderson is covering the inquiry.
These images are seared into the nation's memory of fire season. Desperate animals struggling to outrun danger.
It is going to take 30, 50 years to restore animals back into good numbers, but unless we address the issues with our changing climate, it's never going to happen.
This koala hospital has returned almost all that survived back to the wild now, but the Royal Commission has heard many animals did not make it.
An ecological disaster.
The fires burned with an unusual intensity and devastating results.
More than 300 of these nationally listed threatened species were in the path of the fire. The entire known range of some species was burnt.
But among the evidence of biodiversity lost, a tale of survival. The Jurassic-era Wollemi pines are in a secret New South Wales location. Only a handful of the living fossils are known to exist across the world. Over summer, an extraordinary plant rescue was undertaken. In the end, webcams were left to monitor when it got too dangerous for specialist firefighters to stay.
If the canopy had burnt, the results would have been catastrophic.
The Royal Commission heard Australia has globally distinct biodiversity, and only about 30% of what's here has been named and identified. It's possible over the fire season, some species have disappeared before they were ever discovered by Western science. Anna Henderson, ABC News, Canberra.
To finance now, and the latest unrest in Hong Kong triggered some late selling on the Australian market. But investors flocked back to the banks. Here's Philip Lasker.
The Australian share market essentially held on to its gains, and it's pretty much all the banks. The local market's financial index has rallied nearly 12% this week. Look at the big players. This was a great day for the Gang of Four. NAB increased the size of its capital raising by $750 million from $500 million. Investors think the downturn won't be as bad as first thought. This price earnings measure factors in what UBS thinks will be the bank's provisions for bad loans. If you reckon the economy will be hit hard with a high number of bad loans, the banks look expensive. But strip away the bad loan provisions and look at profit before tax, the banks are cheap. So those feeling the bad news is overdone are buying these stocks. The domestic market slipped 5 points after a very strong start to the week. Optimism is not good for gold shares, but energy stocks are recovering. The latest construction numbers show what happened during the March quarter this year. It doesn't account for the full coronavirus effect, but building and construction were weakening. Apartments drove most of the fall. Instead of buying new homes, people started renovating, as you can see by the pickup in alterations. It's going to get much worse, though. That's why the government is considering a round of housing grants to support the industry. The Australian dollar is close to a 3-month high against the greenback. It's well above 66 US cents, and that's finance.
The Cronulla Sharks have questioned how long it's taken the Sports Anti-Doping Agency to investigate suspended player Bronson Xerri. Xerri returned a positive test of 4 banned drugs last November, but was only told of the result yesterday.
Very disappointing that it has taken so long to notify the NRL and the club of the infringement.
But sports lawyer Catherine Ordway says there may be valid reasons for the 6-month delay.
He's quite young, so it may be that he hasn't been tested a lot by ASADA in the past, which means they need to have a longitudinal study to look to see what his hormones are like over time.
Xerri was due to play his first game for the season on Saturday when the Sharks take on the Wests Tigers in the NRL's comeback round. The NRL competition resumes tomorrow night with no crowds, but finally some live action. The Parramatta Eels will take on the Brisbane Broncos, and for loyal Sydney fans, it can't come soon enough. Jonathan Hare reports.
And listen to this roar, the blue and gold army.
He knows how it ends. The Parramatta Eels superfan Troy Warner never tires of rewatching old games.
Sometimes some of the Parramatta games that we lose, I sort of watch a little bit of it and then switch it off.
But since the NRL season was suspended due to the pandemic, classic games have been the only thing on TV in the Parra Cave.
It was for obvious reasons that it was cancelled, but yeah, I was wondering, what am I going to watch on the weekends? And the fact that Parramatta was sitting on top of the ladder.
Live matches was something the D'Souza household took for granted.
We were sitting here twiddling our thumbs on, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, just wishing that we could watch Parra again. So, yeah, we really missed it when it was taken away.
There's growing excitement about the game starting back up.
Did anyone at school talk about the footy starting?
Yeah, everyone is. Basically, I'm just looking forward to see the game back on.
Can you find your name on there?
Oh, yeah, I can.
Nicola Webber is one of the Eels' younger die-hard fans.
I don't like this one while I was saying it's a little, I don't know, it's a little weird. And this says thank you.
Her message for the team.
I love you, Power. Go, Power.
Go, Power! The Parramatta Eels.
The Eels take on the Broncos tomorrow night at Lang Park in Brisbane. And no matter which team you support, there's one thing all fans can agree on. Everybody's glad the footy's back. Jonathan Hare, ABC News, Sydney.
Time for the weather now, and it could be a foggy commute tomorrow morning, Graham.
Yeah, conditions are looking good for some fairly widespread fog tomorrow morning, Juanita. We may even see that pushing far enough east to reach the city and also the airport. The maximums and minimums across Sydney were pretty close to average today. Our tops range from 17.7 at Terry Hills through to 20.6 at Badgerys Creek. Now, the northeast recorded well above average minimums, with the northwest coolest compared to average. And a weakening low actually triggered 111 millimetres of rain out at Lord Howe Island. That's since 9 a.m. But the remainder of the state has been mostly dry. Any showers have been light and isolated. White Cliffs, Wagga and Albury airports were all coolest compared to average as far as maximums go this afternoon. Now, cloud over the state is associated with a series of weak fronts and troughs, but we've got a high pressure system sitting underneath all that, so it's helping to keep the atmosphere fairly stable. The high itself will dominate the state as we move through the weekend. That's ahead of a front that will affect the inland around Saturday, Sunday, and then a much stronger and colder front due during Monday and Tuesday. So showers will increase in Perth tomorrow. That's with a trough ahead of a cold front. We've got dry conditions for the remaining capitals. Adelaide could just see a very isolated and light shower. But fog will be a fairly major feature across the state, although there could be an early isolated shower about the far southeastern inland as well. So in the northeast, we've got patchy light frost on the tableland, widespread areas of fog possible in most districts. We've got a dry, mostly sunny day to follow with generally light winds. Mostly light winds also expected on the waters. Now, frost should be confined to the alpine areas. We've got fog more widespread though. A partly cloudy but mostly dry day to follow, although there is the potential of an isolated shower in the alpine areas. That could fall as snow above about 1,700 metres. A very low chance about the coast of a shower. We've got a weak trough that's going to spread a southwesterly wind change up the waters as we move through the morning. We'll see some areas of fog with mostly sunny day inland apart from the southeast, where we'll see a few very isolated and generally light showers, most of those in the morning. Now, a weak southwesterly wind change should reach Sydney coastal waters by early afternoon. We've got lows ranging from 6 to 13 and our tops should reach 19 to 22. So that early fog should reach into the more eastern parts of Sydney. We've got a sunny day to follow though. Now we are showing a shower possible on Friday. These are going to be very isolated, very light. For the most part it'll be dry. A dry weekend but substantially cooler conditions arriving, Juanita, as we move into the middle of next week.
Thanks for that, Graham. Lee Sales is here now with 7:30.